Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is 9:18 on a Thursday morning. Kind of an overcast day. I think it's supposed to be pretty nice, relatively nice this weekend, going into this weekend. So yeah. Also, we have a big Quantum show coming up tomorrow with the Quantum and the Button Men. Button Men is a great band from Portland. Wally, it's pretty much a main person or a main guy, the one main guy. Wally, who is a really talented guy. I've worked with him quite a few times, and so we the first time had a really cool interaction with him. The first time I met him was about 3 years ago. So we've done quite a few shows together, and I'm gonna probably do a quick video here on Film Fanatic to help promote the show a little bit more. You know, every bit helps these days. So we're gonna be playing tomorrow at 7 o'clock at Hey Sailor, which is pretty much the best venue around. So stay tuned for that, and I'm gonna probably do a quick little video about that soon. So anyway, yeah, I really excited to talk about the show I'm going to be discussing for probably the next handful of videos, which I'm really excited to talk about. It's a show. Uh, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and it's funny when you say a big Star Wars fan, like it's really changed for me over the years. You know, I grew up like a billion other kids seeing Star Wars for the first time, and I was enamored with it. You know, I do love science fiction and horror being my favorite genre, but I really love science fiction and horror. I love especially when both of those genres are fused together, and it's really fabulous. I do consider myself also a Star Trek fan. Not as much, but I do like Star Trek quite a bit. But Star Wars was something I gravitated towards more as a kid. I remember seeing Star Wars: A New Hope in the theater, or shouldn't say I didn't see it in the theater. I'm old, but I'm not that old. Um, I didn't see Star Wars in the theater, but I remember seeing it on television as a little kid, and also um, VHS. And of course, that's an iconic movie. The start of this entire massive franchise. But I do have memories as a kid seeing Return of the Jedi in the theater, and I was really young. It was probably one of the first, if not the first movie I remember seeing in the theater as a little kid. And you know, I and then Empire Strikes Back, which over the years you hear about people talking about their favorite Star Wars movie, and what decade was their favorite time for this massive franchise that is the Star Wars universe. And most people say Empire Strikes Back, and I still say to this day it's always been my favorite, and it still remains my favorite. It's the darker, it's the more mature, it's the most action packed movie. It's the best directed. It's the best. It's the most well written. Um, and Star Wars has changed for me so much over the years. Um, and I've had, well, lots of ups and downs with the franchise, mostly negative. Mostly, it's changed for me on how I think about the Star Wars universe in a more negative light. So today's show, I'm going to be talking about this series that came out in 2022. It was a Disney Plus show, and it's called Andor. And this was a series that I heard about, and one of my best friends who is really well read, and he knows the whole Star Wars universe like the back of his hand. And for me, I don't stream television shows. I don't stream movies. I watch. I'm a physical media guy. I do see television shows, but I'm usually late to the game when I do see them. And I do eventually see them, and there are some television shows out there that are just incredible. There are some other shows that are, well, there's just so many. There's just so many. And so I'm excited to. I had heard Andor from my friend Mike, who I just mentioned. He said that this thing is just, it's amazing. And he felt it's kind of what Star Wars should be. And he was always hoping that this new series called Andor was going to, just is the best thing out there, basically. And I just rented it a few days ago, so I'm on this second or third disc of season one of Andor. So that's what today's show is going to be about. But with it's a big, massive, well, bloated franchise, the Star Wars universe, and so there's a lot to talk about on this show. And then this season. There's a lot to talk about within that. So again, Star Wars for me, before I get into Andor, this might be a longer video, but there's a lot to talk about and to unpack. Star Wars for me, of course, when I look at it now, and there's been so many decades, from the 70s to here we are. So many movies have come out, and again, I remember many many years ago when it was announced, when this whole thing kind of basically rebooted, and George Lucas still owned Star Wars before he sold it to Disney. He had these plans of basically re-releasing the first three films: Star Wars: A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. He was going to basically re-release all three films in the theater, and because at that time, and then, which is almost ancient history at this point, but in the 70s and the 80s, obviously everything was practical effects. There was no CGI, and he had made plans many many years later to re-release these films with the advent of all of this new technology with CGI, and he was going to be adding all of these scenes, new creatures, extended scenes, and what have you, new special effects. And I remember when that was announced, so long ago. I think I was in college, I think, when those films came out. And the first one that was going to be released, of course, was A New Hope. And I remember, just being kind of blown away of this idea that these films were going to be re-released and also remastered and enhanced by the new technology that was, at the filmmakers' disposals, and in this case, George Lucas. And I saw all three of those films in the theater when they came out, and ultimately, it was very mixed. I had a very mixed reaction. It was great and wonderful to see them on the big screen. They were all remastered. The clarity, the definition of the picture was just absolutely incredible, and all of these things. But in all honesty, I was not a fan of the new CGI elements in these movies. I just felt like it just stood out to me as looking too artificial. And George Lucas was hell bent on telling this story, showing these films the way he wanted to, and how he originally intended on doing it. So he basically pushed in and forced this whole thing onto the public. And with those releases of those films, I mean, it was massive. I mean, billions of dollars were made. It was a a pretty gutsy move by George Lucas to do something like that. And financially, it paid off. It was huge. It was a massive thing. And it definitely, I would say, the fan base has always been massively huge for Star Wars. I, especially at that time, I had always considered myself, and I still do, but it has changed for me dramatically. But I was one of those hardcore Star Wars fans. I still consider myself a fan, but it has changed greatly, and I'm going to eventually get into that. So, but the thing that really turned me off to George Lucas, and I felt like there was this big, major shift into how George Lucas perceived Star Wars, his baby. I mean, his creation of these films, and arguably the most important, arguably the most popular science fiction movies of all time up until that point, especially with Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope. I mean, it's safe to say that at that time, and I think even to this day, I mean, the most iconic science fiction movies ever made. So, you know, the thing that really shifted and changed for me was when those movies came out or were re-released. It was kind of the during the time of the massive when DVDs became huge. I mean, you started, obviously with people, having or beta started it all, where basically you could have these tapes and watch them at home and then record over them, and then that died a quick death. That shifted over to VHS. That was very popular for quite a while, and then DVD, and then and then after that Blu-ray, and then 4K, where we are now. And there's newer things after that. But so when those movies came out, the re-releases of those Star Wars films, basically that was when the DVD explosion or revolution started, and suddenly, the quality of all of these films was superior to anything you would have seen on VHS and especially beta. So it was massive. But George Lucas, one of the things that he did was suddenly the original versions of the films that came out in the 70s and 80s were no longer available. You couldn't. He basically what George Lucas did is he basically took all of those versions of the films and basically took them off the market. They were not available. The only versions you could get, whether buying them or seeing them on cable or buying them on DVD, were the new versions. And he basically like banned his own movies and said, "Well, no, those movies, I'm disposing them, and this is all I'm giving you." And it was due to his control of what he wanted these films to be, because he had said over the years that he couldn't pull off a lot of. He felt like technically he couldn't pull off because of where technology was. He couldn't pull off a lot of the things that he had in his vision. So when he did that, that caused a massive backlash with Star Wars fans, and including myself, because I was just like, there's something wrong here. Like, why is he kind of like, you know, treating these films, at least the original versions, so badly. These were movies that put him on the map, and these are films that mean so much to the fans, and they are very different versions in comparison to these newer ones. But why would you take that stance? And it caused this backlash, for quite a while. Where I remember suddenly there were lots of fans that were outraged that George Lucas had the audacity to kind of do that. And this went on for a few years. And then I remember, due to, and obviously, DVDs were the big thing. The internet was getting bigger, so it was, technology was growing at such a exponential rate. So there was so much outcry that eventually George Lucas kind of changed his tune because he realized, while he was pissing off fans by doing that, he's like, okay, now I will let the original versions do their thing, and I will make them available for the public. So suddenly he caved to the pressure from his fans, and suddenly the original versions, as well as his newer versions of these films, you were able to buy and rent. But this whole kind of thing went on for a while, and then shortly after, it was announced that George Lucas was going to be putting out these prequel movies. And again, that even kicked up the whole firestorm of enthusiasm and love and appreciation for Star Wars even more. Especially for me, when I heard that it was announced that he was going to be making three new movies, but these films were going to be prequels to A New Hope. I, as a fan, as a fanboy, I was like, okay, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind. And I was so excited, beyond belief. And then the first movie came out of the prequels, The Phantom Menace, and I remember I don't up until that point I had never been more excited to see a movie, and I remember going to the theater, and I felt so excited. But when I watched the movie the first time, I went in with such anticipation and such excitement that this is going to be just the most amazing film going experience. And ultimately, I left the theater just really underwhelmed, disappointed, wanting a feeling of really wanting more, and I didn't know what to think. And then I remember going to the theater saying, oh, I need to love this movie. It's Star Wars, and it was such a disappointment. I remember going to the theater, and I saw it two or three times in the theater, and each time I saw that movie, it just was the experience was worse. And then the subsequent other films that were released, I felt were I felt like things just got worse. I really do. And I felt like um, I mean, I know the Star Wars movies are made for younger people. They're George Lucas based these stories on, it's a combination of different things, like the old serial movies from like the 30s and 40s, and comic books. And he was also really influenced majorly by Joseph Campbell, the hero saga, and all of his glorious work, and also greatly inspired by Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which basically is Star Wars. I mean, if you watch Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, it is Star Wars. He used that as a blueprint. But I felt like, but I also feel like those movies dealt, the first three, especially the first two, dealt with like real human themes. So there was like this thing that wasn't just for kids. I felt like it dealt with this universal thing of why mythology resonates with people throughout the millennium, as a species. And so there was like some depth there. But I felt like these newer films, these prequels, were essentially like really light-hearted kids films, and and all of the performances, the writing, I felt was, especially the performances, were just uh, wooden. There was no emotion. There was no, it just felt like this stuff was made for like a 5-year old, and there was no depth to any of the characters, and there was no um, long lasting power. And there's a really interesting documentary that's out on YouTube about the making of the Phantom Menace, and how George Lucas wanted such control and wanted this thing so locked away, as far as not revealing anything to the public, and it even was to his actors that he hired. where there were scenes of where he basically, didn't give his actors the script until a lot of the days of where they were shooting. So the performances were like super stiff and wooden and void of any emotion. And it was also there was so much CGI in some of these films. I mean, it was all there was no more practical effects. Basically, it was all green screen, and it just felt really artificial. Attack of the Clones was the follow up to Phantom Menace, and that movie I feel was pretty much unwatchable. Um, and and it just got worse from there. And then yeah, and so the more recent films, The Force Awakens, that was again, I was very excited to see that film, directed by J.J. Abrams, and I saw that in the theater, and I was really excited to see it. I did like it, and but now, and I've seen it a billion times. In all honesty, I've seen it a shit ton of times. I liked it when I first saw it, and it made me really excited for this whole new Star Wars universe. But now I can't even make it through it. I can't make it through it because I feel like it's such a regurgitated um, display of ideas that worked in the first couple of movies, and it felt like they were trying to appease certain kinds of, different fractions of the fan base instead of just telling a good cohesive original story. There were all these tropes. It was a blueprint of just line by line, shot by shot of A New Hope. And now when I watch it, it's so obvious to me, and I can't even watch it anymore. It's like I yeah, and I own it on Blu-ray. And then again, the later movies after The Force Awakens were inherently worse, and they're not even really worth talking about. And even in hindsight, I grew up watching, and again, I had my first experience seeing Star Wars. The first movie I ever saw in the theater was Return of the Jedi. I was very, very young, and I have to say, in all honesty, Return of the Jedi, I don't feel like is that great of a movie. It doesn't hold up very well. Empire is still a masterpiece, and The New Hope is still incredible. But when I think about it now, so many decades later, where I am as a Star Wars fan, and what do I actually think is really good, and a movie that I feel uh, grows and ages well, like a bottle of fine wine. I'm like, holy shit! Like, there's so many movies that are just pure clunkers, and I've even questioned, am I even really a Star Wars fan? Because I feel like with how massive this franchise is, and then that doesn't even include all the television shows and all of the spin-off shows, Solo and Rogue One, and all of the shit that's come out. Um, the Last Jedi. I mean, it's just insane how many things there are in this universe. The animated series, all of those. I'm like, wow, maybe I'm not really a Star Wars fan, and really it comes down to like the first two movies, especially Empire, that I'm a fan of. But in my hearts of hearts, I'm still a massive Star Wars fan because, like billions of other kids growing up, it was magic to me. So I had heard that Andor was really really great, and again, I don't stream television shows. I don't stream movies. I do love television shows. There are some that are really really great. My favorite television show of all time is True Detective season one. I've done multiple shows on that. Other shows that I really love, as far as more modern television shows, is Manhunter, the Unabomber series about David Kaczynski. That's an incredible show. Absolutely awesome and just totally riveting. And another series that I really love a lot is Mindhunter. David Fincher's Mindhunter. Just great. Those are three shows I think are just absolutely incredible. But easily season 1 True Detective is hands down the best, my favorite television show of all time. For me, it's like more of a movie experience. I can watch that shit right through. And I have to say, I'm on the just about on the third disc of Andor, um, season 1, and I have to say, this series fucking rocks. It's so fucking good. Um, it came out in 2022. It's a Disney Plus series, and it's about Andor, who becomes this, figure in the rebel rebellion against the Empire. And this basically the storyline for this series is the very beginning of this uprising, and Andor is kind of this, well, pretty complicated, almost anti-hero figure who emerges as this rebel hero, and he is the storyline. It does take place about 5 years before Rogue One, which is before A New Hope, and it's about the first uprising, and it's absolutely incredible. I have to say, the writing, the characterization, the music, everything top to bottom, it is so original. It's so fresh. It's got a darker tone, a much darker tone to it. And I'm like, my first reaction is like this series Andor is better than virtually every fucking Star Wars movie I have ever seen. And I'm like, this is Disney Plus, and it's a streaming television show. It was not released in the theater. I would have loved to have seen this in the theater. It doesn't, even though this is a series, I have to say it feels like a movie going experience. It really does. It doesn't feel like a television show. Um, and it moves right along. It's really exciting. It's completely riveting. The writing is just so awesome. It's got some great action, and it's just so original. And there's no, what I love about it is there's no Jedi. In this film. There's nobody wielding lightsabers. There's not any of those tropes that we've seen a billion times that are just forced in every movie just to appease fans. This is like something new, original. You can literally watch this series without knowing anything about Star Wars, about anything to do with the mythology. It's totally and purely its own thing, which is the thing that I love about it the most. And the first episode in season 1, Cassian Andor, it's the introduction to this amazing character. Is absolutely amazing. It really is from top to bottom. Again, it's really gritty. It's so well written. There's so much intensity, a lot of suspense, some really great action. It's the whole like world building. It's just absolutely incredible. And I'm like, my first reaction, and what I'm going to do with a series of these next few videos is I'm going to talk about each episode, because I think this show rocks. I would totally buy this on Blu-ray. I got this series through Opera House Video, the great and glorious last man standing as far as video rental places in the state of Maine. I got that. I rented it from them on DVD from Dennis Dennis Howard, and so I I'm just kind of blown away by it. I think it's an amazing series. The first episode, Cassian, about, and again, it's the introduction to this incredible character, is just fantastic. It literally is everything that I wish Star Wars could be. And I really think that this series blows away virtually every Star Wars movie that has come out in every way possible. Because I feel like this is made for like people who are like, you know, it's smartly made. It's made for people who have brains. It's got intrigue. There's a lot of suspense. I love the darker tone. It's really gritty. The characters, the cast is awesome. Again, like I said, the world that we're introduced to is just so great. And there's this thing of like, again, the coolest aspect of this movie, and again, I'm referring to it as a movie because I feel like that's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like a television show, but it is a series. Is that it's such a standalone thing. Like you could find a person out there who has no ties to Star Wars or doesn't even know what Star Wars is, and they could probably sit down and watch this and totally enjoy this. It's completely, that's the thing I love about it, is it's truly its own thing. It's its own standalone thing. You don't have to know any of the backstory or even the mythology. And I don't know, and the thing that perplexes me on how, because it's so damn good, is this is Disney Plus. Of course, George Lucas sold the entire franchise to Disney for like, I don't know, $700 billion or whatever. He just made the biggest, got the biggest paycheck in history. And Disney has been responsible for putting out, well, these last three movies, um, Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and the one I can't even mention. And they're responsible for all of these other series that have come out, the spin-off movies, Rogue One and Solo, um, and and I'm like, these movies are just so, um, well, I just feel like they're just so bad. Like they're just the thing that and I don't get it, why Disney was able to make something so good in the midst of all of this crap. Where they've basically been taking things that have worked, and all of and especially the first two movies, New Hope and Empire, things that really worked and made those movies incredible, and they've basically just have taken elements from those movies and copied and pasted them. So there's like nothing new, no new ideas. They've really tried to dumb things down. They've watered things down as much as they can to make things really family friendly, to the point of where it's like ridiculous. And then the other thing that Disney has done is try to appease so many people. They want to make people happy. They want to give people this comfortable product of where there's a level of familiarity, and God forbid you rattle the cage and you like, oh wait, you have to like think about something new and get introduced to a new idea or concept. Oh, that's awful. We need to have the same old regurgitated garbage over and over again. And try to, have as many cooks in the kitchen creatively to appease, you know, young new Star Wars fans, and then we got to appease the old, the old school fans like myself. And then we gotta like, we have to like bring in a new generation, and so we gotta like fill every movie with all of these tropes. We have to have Jedi's in every movie. We have to have that element. We have to have battle scenes with lightsabers. We have to have references to every other movie that's come out. We have to like always bring back characters that we've seen a billion times just because that's comfortable and that feels good to see again. And fucking Andor doesn't do any of that. It just tells a good story, and it just discards all of that. And it's it's creative. They took a chance. It's gritty, and it's actually made with intelligence, and it's new. It's fresh. There's none of that. None of those bullshit tropes that we've seen a billion times over and over again, just for the sake of. I mean, when you think of the Jedi, at one point that was a really interesting thing, and I loved it to death. You know, the idea of what a Jedi is, and the and what that means. But now it's like it doesn't even to me it doesn't it's devalued what the true essence of what the Jedi is or was, because we just see it all the time, and it's just thrown in just to like, oh, well, it's not a Star Wars movie if we don't have a lightsaber battle. It's gotten so ridiculous and redundant and watered down that it just has devalued everything that was established in the previous films. But Andor does not do that. It's made with intelligence and something fresh. And the first episode is just absolutely incredible. And I just wish Kassa about Kassa. It's the introduction to Kassa Andor. I just wish um, I just wish there was they could have done this in the other films, but thank God they made this. Cast is amazing. Diego Luna, who plays Cassian Andor, is just absolutely awesome in it. He was in Rogue One playing Cassian Andor as well. This just eclipses any of those movies, and especially Rogue One. Uh, Andrea Aroha, Denise Go, Stellan Skarsgård is in this, who's just super badass. Ben Miles, Fiona Shaw, um, Kyle Soller, who is such a great character in this movie, or in this series. Yeah, the first episode, Kassa is just super badass, and I'm going to be talking about each episode as I go, but I can't recommend this series enough. I'm on the third disc. Just one of the best introductions to a really important character. But again, you don't need to know any backstory at all. You literally could see this without even knowing what Star Wars is, and not having seeing anything tied to the Star Wars universe. It's just so good. So thanks again, and see you next time. Peace.